God literally told me, and this is a voice, I mean, I heard it. He said, if you don't come clean to her.
Faith is based on evidence. Faith is based on character established.
Terry Crews wasn't always the bold, Bible-quoting powerhouse you see today. Before the lights, before the cameras, he was just a confused kid sitting in a pew, watching faith get tangled in rules and silence. What you're about to hear isn't the polished Hollywood version. It's raw, it's honest. It's the story of a man who confronted fake religion, found real faith, and now refuses to bow to atheist Hollywood. So smash that like button, subscribe for more Faith Meets Fire stories, and buckle up. Because it all begins with a voice from God that said, "Come clean or I'm done with you."
And this is a voice, I mean, I heard it. He said, if you don't come clean to her. I was born and raised in the church. Some of my earliest memories is...
Before the fame, before the cameras, Terry Crews was just a kid sitting in the pews of a church in Flint, Michigan, watching his mother pray with fire. His earliest identity wasn't built on Hollywood lights, but on the foundation of faith. That same church is where he first understood community, hope, and purpose. But behind those stained glass beginnings was also a heavy weight of tradition. Because not everything about church life was freeing. Some parts were deeply restrictive.
Was very, very restrictive. I mean, this is the thing. It was more about what we couldn't do than what we could do.
Imagine being told you couldn't dance, couldn't play sports, or even enjoy a movie just because of your faith. That was Terry's reality. The rules were loud, but the relationship with God was strangely silent. It planted seeds of rebellion, confusion, and shame. But later in life, Terry would confront all that religious performance, and he'd make a radical shift. A shift that forced him to strip away appearances and ask the question, am I wearing faith like a mask?
There was a time when I had to decide whether I was going to be religious or have a real relationship, you know, and
Right.
To be religious is almost like wearing a mask.
This is where Terry gets brutally honest. He admits religion became a costume, one he wore so long it started to feel real. But he wasn't living in truth. It wasn't about God, it was about image. What would people think? How holy do I look? That mask started cracking, and what poured out underneath was a man disconnected from God and dangerously close to snapping. Because you can only fake it for so long before the anger starts leaking through.
But you didn't really activate it in your life. So I walked around super, super angry. And let me tell you.
He knew the church language, born again, saved, grace, but none of it meant anything yet. Terry was just repeating words while living with a quiet rage that no one could see. It wasn't until the anger nearly consumed him that he realized something had to give. And that's when God stepped in. Not gently, not politely, but with a warning so clear, so personal, it shook him. Because when God calls you out, you either confess or collapse.
God literally told me, and this is a voice, I mean, I heard it. He said, if you don't come clean to her.
Come clean or I'm done with you. That's what Terry heard, not from a pastor, not from a book, but straight from God. Grace had been extended, but now it was time for truth. And Terry chose to obey. That moment didn't just restore his soul, it rewired his manhood. But not everyone around him understood that kind of faith. So how does a man of God walk boldly in a city that mocks conviction? Terry had to find out.
The first thing you have to do is admit your powerlessness. You have to admit you don't have control anymore.
There comes a moment in every man's life when pride fails and the mask falls off. For Terry, it wasn't therapy or fame that brought peace. It was crying out to God in total surrender. He admitted he wasn't in control, and that was the most powerful thing he'd ever done. But even after finding God, people still questioned his faith. In fact, some couldn't believe he still believed. That's when Terry made one thing painfully clear. God was never the problem. People were.
Where the problem was people. The problem was not God. The problem was not the Bible. The problem was not this thing about loving each other. The problem was not Jesus.
Hollywood keeps asking, how can a man still cling to faith after all the hypocrisy in the church? Terry's answer is simple. Jesus was never the one who failed him. It was broken people misusing his name. So instead of running from God, Terry ran deeper into him, cutting through all the religious noise to rediscover what faith really is. Not blind, not empty, not imaginary, but grounded. Because real faith isn't some fantasy. It's forged through fire and tested through time.
Faith is based on evidence. Faith is based on character established.
Terry dismantles the myth that faith is for the weak or the naive. For him, faith is built like muscle, tested, proven, consistent. It's about showing up even when the spotlight's off. You don't build godly character on Sunday morning alone. It takes repetition, humility, and the kind of strength that Hollywood rarely understands. But Terry wasn't just preaching, he was putting it into practice. Because to live this kind of faith, you've got to build some new spiritual muscles.
Because faith is not built in a vacuum. Faith is based on evidence. Faith is based on character established through time and repetition.
This wasn't just about belief, it was about training. Terry knew that if he was going to walk a different path, he had to discipline his soul like he did his body. Hollywood builds image, but faith builds endurance. That's the evidence Terry kept stacking over time. Changed habits, better choices, humble leadership, and when everything in LA said compromise, Terry chose conviction. But he didn't do it alone. In a city famous for isolating people, one community helped anchor him.
Church really saved me because we came to LA. We were Christians. We had been a part of churches on all our NFL teams.
Terry didn't survive Hollywood by sheer willpower. He survived because he stayed connected to a living church. Not a building, but a body of believers who kept him grounded. From NFL teams to LA churches, faith was the thread that held his family and sanity together. And while the industry tried to shape him into its image, Terry kept running back to the cross. But this wasn't just about belief, it was about action. And in the next moment, Terry puts it all on the line.
I remember the Holy Spirit telling me, I said, look, you've got something going here. Don't let go. It's like a marriage when God puts something together.
When Terry heard the Holy Spirit say, "Don't let go," he knew this wasn't just about feelings, it was about covenant. Faith, like marriage, requires endurance. That whisper became a lifeline, a reminder that divine purpose doesn't always come with applause. In an industry that promotes easy exits, Terry leaned into spiritual commitment, but he didn't carry that weight alone. When things got tough, he went back to where his foundation was laid and reached for the voices that raised him right.
You know, like, Dad, what do I do here? You know what I mean? It was like they've always been our spiritual parents in a lot of ways, and it was wild because the light came on.
Terry turned to his parents, not just for comfort, but for wisdom. They were his spiritual compass, guiding him back to the power of forgiveness. And when he finally saw it clearly, he understood. Forgiveness isn't just letting go, it's making things right. That lesson unlocked something deep in Terry's heart. He didn't just believe differently, he lived differently. And that's when one of the most emotional, redemptive moments of his life unfolded. A moment with the man he once couldn't forgive.
Big Terry, because that's what we called him. You know, I'm little Terry, he was Big Terry. I said, Big Terry, thank you so much for having me. Because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't exist.
Terry didn't just say he was born again, he proved it. In a deeply moving encounter, he thanked the man who hurt him most and received an apology wrapped in tears. That's the kind of grace Hollywood doesn't understand. It's not performative, it's powerful. And Terry knew this wasn't weakness, this was real strength. Because Christianity isn't about loving the lovable, it's about forgiving the ones who don't deserve it. And Terry's about to explain exactly why that's the highest call of all.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is the highest calling of Christianity. You are no more Christian than when you love those who don't deserve it.
Forgiveness is the highest calling of Christianity. Terry doesn't just say it, he lives it. In a world that celebrates revenge and drags out cancel culture, Terry chose mercy, real mercy, the kind that says, you hurt me, but I'll still love you. That's what separates cultural faith from actual faith. But forgiveness isn't magic, it's not always immediate. And Terry's about to say something most believers are too scared to admit, that healing doesn't happen on command.
Because healing is a process. Healing takes time. First there's a wound, then there's a scab.
Forgiveness may happen in a moment, but trust, that's a journey. Terry lays it out with raw honesty. Healing takes time. There's no spiritual shortcut, no performance to rush it. Whether it's a spouse, a parent, or even yourself, restoration is earned, not demanded. And in a world where Hollywood wants everything fast and shallow, Terry's message lands like a gut punch. Because this isn't about acting holy, it's about living holy. One slow, redemptive step at a time. Terry Crews didn't just survive Hollywood, he walked through its fire and came out refined, not ruined. His story isn't perfect, but it's powerful. And it proves that faith isn't weakness, it's warfare. So if you're tired of seeing faith treated like a joke in pop culture, hit that subscribe button and stay locked in. We've got more voices who refuse to stay silent. Now tell us, what's one moment in your life where faith made you stronger? Drop it in the comments, we read every one.